The Drum Candy Podcast is brought to you by Drum Factory Direct.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into episode 11 of season 2 of the Drum Candy Podcast. This is your host, Mike Dawson, coming to you from Drum Factory Direct in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This week's intro beat was sent from an old friend of mine who used to write some articles for Modern Drummer back in the day. Uka, he's down in Recife, Brazil. He wrote some articles on Brazilian drumming for the magazine. So it's good to hear from you, Uka. His beat here, he says he recorded it all with his iPhone, drums, djembe, shaker, and some voice. The rhythm is called a coco. It is from the northeast region of Brazil, and he used some Yamaha drums, African djembe, a shaker, and wood blocks. Very, very cool beat. Thank you, Uka. Great to hear from you. Hope all is going great in your world. And if any of you want to submit a beat, I need some intro beats, so send them over to drumcandypodcast@gmail.com. I don't want the show just to be a bunch of my stuff, so I want to hear from you. Send videos, send audio. It can be mixed, it can be raw, whatever you want to send. And if you don't mind, please try to include some info about what you're playing, the gear you're using, what the concept is. It can all be video or audio, or you can just email it. That's all good too. So send that all over to drumcandypodcast@gmail.com. Okay, what's new this week? I'm going to mention this again. Stickshed.com is live if you need a place to find whatever your favorite drumsticks are. Mallets, brushes, some assorted practice accessories. We have almost everything, I think, from Vic Firth, Zildjian, ProMark, and Vader. And we've got a bunch of ahead stuff as well. So go over to stickshed.com, create an account, and let us know if you can't find something you're looking for. You can just email drumcandypodcast@gmail.com if you have any questions. But yeah, we really want to get some feedback on that site. So check it out, stickshed.com. As far as some new music you might want to check out, the Headhunters just is putting out a new album. It's not out yet, but I got an advance on it. It comes out, looks like November 4th. That is the legendary kind of jazz funk band with Mike Clark playing drums. I'm actually going to have Mike on the show here in a couple weeks to talk about the making of this record. But yeah, be on the lookout for that. The record is called Speakers in the House. It's Mike's killing as always, so we'll dig more into that when we have him on the show, but just keep an eye out. Next up, Bob Weir of the Grateful Dead. He has a new record that's called Bobby Weir and Wolf Brothers Live in Colorado Volume 2. That features Jay Lane on drums. If you remember Jay Lane from the early days of Primus and the band Sausage with Les Claypool, really, really great drummer. I guess he's been working with Bob Weir for a number of years. So that record, again, is called Live in Colorado Volume 2. All right, one more new record that's coming out, or is actually just out. It's this week's featured artist who we also featured last week, Duduka da Fonseca. His album is called Yes. I believe it is out now. Check it out. It's by Duduka da Fonseca and Quarteto Universal. Yes, with 3 exclamation points. Really, really fantastic Brazilian jazz record. So give that one a listen. And we have 2 documentaries you might want to be on the lookout for. The first one is Let There Be Drum. That is by Justin Kreutzmann. He is the son of Bill Kreutzmann of the Grateful Dead. That comes out October 28th. It is, let's see, it's got interviews. It's one of the last interviews with Taylor Hawkins. Also features interviews with Ringo Starr, Stuart Copeland, Mickey Hart, Bill Kreutzmann, Stephen Perkins, Chad Smith, Matt Sorum, many, many more. So all things drums. It's called Let There Be Drums, and that comes out on Apple TV, Amazon Prime, and it's going to be in theaters as well on October 28th. And then lastly, this is not a drum documentary, but a bass documentary, which is equally as important for us drummers. This is on Daryl Jones. It's called In the Blood. Features interviews with Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Ronnie Wood, the late Charlie Watts, and many, many more. So be on the lookout for that. Daryl Jones, In the Blood. For the main topic this week, and probably the next 2 weeks, we are going to be discussing what does the species of wood do to the sound of a snare drum. So what I did was I commissioned Chris Carr over at Bucks County Drums to build. I said, you pick your woods that you would like to work with that would be best representative of the most readily available domestic species and the most popular domestic species. So in this, I'm going to talk with Chris here. I'm going to bring him on. We're going to talk about the whole thing, but They're identical drums, so the only thing different is the actual wood being made. So we're going to go through the next couple weeks demoing all 6 drums, different tunings, trying to find a sweet spot. Hopefully bring in some guests to do some blindfold tests. We're going to have a lot of fun with that. But before we dive into all of that, let's chat with Chris about just how he made these drums and then some of his thoughts on what makes different woods sound the way they do. So here's Chris Carr of Bucks County Drums on the Prime Series Snare Drum Shootout.
Between that and the 8-ply, but I really dig the cherry because it just sounds like a snare drum like that right out of the box. You know, it's kind of a little on the brighter side. So anyway,
let's get into it. So you built us 6 identical drums, save for the wood species. That's the only difference. So we can really go super nerdy on what does the different species actually sound like. So let's talk about what is the consistency. So all of these are 5.5 by 14-inch drums, correct?
Correct. All 8-ply, all alternating grain, horizontal inside. Same glues, same molds. I think the biggest difference between this comparison to the last comparison we did is that these are done exactly the same way. I have better molds, and I'm using a new glue and better clamping system. So the other drums are great, but these are just, from a builder standpoint, more consistent, more straightforward for me to build. I can train other people to do this process more readily. So they are exactly the same.
Straight shell, no re-rings.
Correct.
Bearing edge, you told me, but I don't remember what it was, 45?
Slight rounder on the outside, and then a 45. That's my standard. You've got 3 coats of a hard oil finish. And I like this finish because it just really brings out the character of the grain of the wood and lets it glow, but protects it from the inside out. I could put on multiple coats. If I want to put on 10 coats, I could do that. But 3 or 4 is usually enough, and it's really silky smooth.
Yeah, it doesn't even look like there's a finish on it. It looks just like wood.
It's great for studio drums because it really lets them speak that much more. Even a high gloss finish adds a certain amount of brightness and a certain amount of weight on the shell, like a wrap. Okay. And that's not a bad thing, but so the only difference is in the species. And you've also got closed grain woods like cherry and maple and birch. There's not a lot of open pores. And then you've got open grain like the ash and the oak, with really, really porous. And then the walnut's kind of in the middle. It's closed grain, but it's got a lot of open pores as well. And that's kind of what helps give it its characteristics. So the biggest difference in species, and I think I should point out to people, is that it's more noticeable, I should say, in toms and in bass drums. In snare drums, when you're tuning at that register, at that pitch, it's much higher tuning generally. And so it's not as noticeable. It's there. It's there, but it's not as noticeable.
Yeah, we'll find out. They all have 8 single point lugs, triple flange, 2.3 steel hoops, I believe. Did you put 16 wires on these?
Exactly.
Evans G1 coated on top, 300 on bottom. What else do we got here? That's all the specs. Let's take a look on the other side. Yeah, so let's go drum by drum, and you give me your assessment of what your experience with that wood has done. So let's start with let's go like soft to hard, and then we can talk about how hardness versus the grain structure affects the sound.
Sure.
So what's the softest of these 6? We have
that would be the cherry. Cherry?
Okay.
Yeah. On the Janka scale, it's 950, but it's a closed grain drum. So you take that hardness and you compare it to African mahogany. It's very similar. It's almost identical, but you've got a more open. But if you listen to them, they have very similar qualities. But it's really nice. So as I said earlier, the cherry, it sounds like a snare drum right out of the box. It's kind of bright. It's got a nice punch to it. It's real open sounding, pretty versatile, and that translates to kits very well as well. Up from there, I believe, is the walnut. And those are, in that bunch, those are the 2 extremes, I would say, in terms of outside the normal. All those drums are actually really close in hardness. When you look at the whole scale, they're in that middle range, but cherry. And then you got the walnut. Walnut's got that dark, kind of raunchy, but cool characteristics. It's not going to have as wide a tuning range. It's going to be, it depends on what you want to get. And this is just like any voice, people are going to do what they want to do with these things and get the sounds they want to get from them. Up from there, I believe, is the Birch. Birch is focused and punchy, a little drier. Ash is kind of like maple on steroids. It's got a little bit higher register bite to it, but it's also super warm and gutsy. And then you got the maple, which we all know what maple does. It's kind of fat and gushy and pretty versatile. I'm finding our maple shells are super resonant, so I have to step them up to 8 or 10 ply. And that's something I'm going to be changing on the website, is going to be going all the snares numbers. Instead of 6 ply with 3 rings and 8 ply, you're going to have 8 or 10 ply options. It's about the same amount of labor and whatnot, but I just feel it gives it gives a better sound.
Interesting.
So,
what made you go away from 6 ply with 3 rings?
It's just too much sound. I'm getting too much bounce back. It's kind of like I was getting with the semi-solid snares. The biggest reason I started making ply drums was the semi-solid drums were great, besides the amount of labor involved and the amount of work involved and the time. There was too much sound. It was just, you're getting a lot of sound from those drums. And in a snare drum, you don't need that. You kind of want it to be there and gone, unless you're going for a vibe or an effect, but you want it to be gone. And so ply drums does that perfectly. And so that's when I started about 5 years ago. Now I'm messing around with the whole ply, actually 6 years ago, the ply format, and started working my way through that, and then developed this whole new system I just love it. It rivals the semi-solids. I mean, it gives, I would say, a sound that most drummers are more accustomed to, and but it projects, gets into the audience, it goes out, and I hear that in the mics every day when I'm messing around in here. So the differences are subtle. When you take all those drums, which I know you're going to do, and you're going to tune them all the same, they're not going to be drastic differences. When you get into major differences, you're going to go to really extremely soft woods, and you're going to go to really hard woods, like exotics, like Bubinga or Jatoba, Yellowheart, things like that. You're going to have much more noticeable, but you're also going to get different overtones. Harder the wood, you're going to have a higher overtone. The softer the wood, you're going to have a lower overtone and different and whatnot. And you're going to have a little bit more negatives because of those extremes. Things that you're going to need to learn how to control, whether that's with tuning or muffling or whatever. So, it's kind of, these are all really usable species, I feel. These are all, you can put them in the studio. They're really common domestic woods. Your more uncommon ones are like hickory. Hickory is it's probably the most hardest. The hardest domestic wood is actually mesquite, but it's a real small wood. It's super, super hard. It's not a practical instrument grade type of lumber. So hickory would be next, and that's difficult to come by.
Okay.
In plies. So at least for me, so far, I haven't found anything.
So the oak is funny because I think of oak being so drastically different than walnut on a hardness perspective, but you're saying these are all kind of living in that middle world. Yeah,
between 900 and 1400, 1450 being the maple, the hardest, and then you got the ash, and then you got the birch, and then you got the walnut and the cherry. I'm missing one. What am I missing?
Oak. Where's that?
Oak. Yeah, oak. Oak is right between. You got oak, ash, and birch. Okay. So it's like bang, bang, bang. They're like 100 points. So what really separates them is the species themselves and the porosity, the open grainness. And there's no sealer on the insides of those shells either. Not really necessary on a ply drum, unless you want to again go for a vibe or maybe a little more volume or something like that. So the oak is punchy though. It's a little drier.
Why is a maple fatter sounding than a softer wood like an oak? It's just the tonality it gives. It's kind of like Bubinga.
when you take the harder wood, you expect it to have this ring to it, but it's got this depth to it, right? So generally speaking, with an extremely hard wood, you can go to a thinner shell, but with the maple, I'm finding it's kind of a balance. In terms of a really hard wood, it's not hard. It's 1450. There's much harder. There's woods that are 2 and 3 and 4 times harder. But it's just got that right combo. It's just the species that we've come to know that works, and then you find something that works. You don't. If it's not broken, don't fix it.
Yeah.
They're really. It's got the right combination of hardness and closed grain. It finishes really nice. It gives a lot of resonance. Certain hardness gives a really nice resonant tone, and it's easy to work with, and it's abundant. You have to look at it from a manufacturer. I'm a big company, I'm a medium small company, but from a manufacturer standpoint, I'm going to go with stuff that's abundant and easy, relatively easy to get and affordable, and then I can keep my costs on my product down. Same with the big company, same thing, and it works.
So porosity versus grain structure, what's the difference? Are they the same? Is that the same thing?
Well, you got what they call closed grain, when the grain is more intertwined. And then you get out of the grain when it's more open. But then you got the pores. The pores kind of suck up the sound, kind of like acoustics in a room. When you have uneven surfaces or you have treatments on your wall, it does the same thing. Or like a hammered shell over, a brass or a bronze hammered shell over a straight brass or bronze shell. It does the same thing, dries it out. So that's what it's going to do, which is really odd about the birch, because it doesn't have that upper register that the ash has, and the ash is open grain. It's got a lot of pores to it, right? So ash was one of the big ones that I fell in love with. It was a big surprise for me. I think you said you liked it too initially.
Yeah, when I was just getting these things tuned up, that was the one that I found myself just playing the longest on. That's usually my first test. Like, which drum do I end up kind of zoning out on?
Right.
And that was the one. Like, walnut was like, cool, that sounds great. Cherry was like, wow, that sounds like an amazing drum. And I put the ash on. I was like, oh, let me try messing around for about 10, 15 minutes.
And I didn't even tune those. I mean, all I did was put the tension watch on it to make sure they were even. I did 75 on the bottom, and I think 85 up top or 90 up top, something like that, which is really the opposite of the way I tune a snare generally. But they're shallower, and they're a thinner shell, so they're pretty open. You got a single point lug, which keeps them open, and then a medium hoop 2.3 keeps them open. I was going for, I would say, moderately maximum sound, and that way you could hear the difference more. And when you play these without snares on, you'll be able to hear the tone in the tom-tom mode. So,
well, we're going to dig deep into each one of these over the next few weeks. But if you had to guess which one was going to be the taster's choice, which one do you think it would be? Cherry. All right.
Yeah, just off the top of my head, because it's just different enough, but sweet enough, if that makes sense.
That's one vote for Cherry. What would be your second pick? Let's just get to Ash. All right.
And then Birch.
All right. There you go.
And I love maple, but, it's like maple's been done to death. It's like, yeah, give me something different. No. So it's like, if these are I listen to them under the mics, and then they speak. So this is what you want. As a recording drummer, or if you're a recording drummer, you're going like jazz. Like, the nice thing about Cherry is that it can really very easily become a jazz snare because it's got that brightness to it, but then you can do anything else with it too. So yeah, those are my top three.
As far as tuning ranges, what I found with the shallow metal drums was we didn't hear a discernible difference until you tuned a little bit lower. Is it going to be the same, do you think, with the wood?
Yeah.
So a high-tuned snare drum is a high-tuned snare drum in most cases.
In most cases, but and like I was saying earlier, when you get into extreme woods like Jatoba, Bubinga, or poplar, you start getting into really soft woods, basswoods, aspen, whatever, pine. I mean, you have to take a poplar shell or a pine snare. You have to make that shell thicker. So what are you doing? You're increasing the pitch of the shell to negate and offset the tubbiness of it, right? Or the softness of it. So it's a balance. And my feeling is this, that ply shells, a well-made ply shell is always going to be king. It's always going to be most versatile. It's always going to be most consistent. It's always going to be most reliable. And while the differences are more subtle when you tune them up, it's still most reliable. But it was like, again, when you get into tom-toms, You take a walnut tom versus, a maple tom, it's night and day. It has a lot to do with the tuning range. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, last couple of questions here. If I fell in love with the cherry snare,
yes, you can buy it.
Would it be logical for me to then say, why don't I get a cherry kit and get the same results? Or would you suggest mixing it with something else?
You can mix that with anything. However, our cherry 8-ply drums are fantastic. The first cherry generation I made was all 6-ply with re-rings, and they sounded good. I found going up to an 8-ply without a re-ring was just magical. It was amazing, the difference night and day. The yellow sparkle lacquer kit I just built for artist Rick Lawton, it's on our Instagram page, has an amazing tone to it. Just really open, just full sustain. You could do anything with it. It has a really versatile tuning range. It just blew me away. People, don't be afraid to mix and match. I would love to see like a cherry snare with an ash kit. You got a nice, even in natural finish, a nice contrast there. But you could finish them however you want.
All right. Now, then the next logical progression would be if, let's say you absolutely loved, I'm looking at the cherry and the walnut. Those two, you're like, I love them. Let's put them both in one shell. Would that be a disaster? Mixing and matching these species?
No. It can be. That's a combination I probably would not do. I don't think they would jive real well together, just off the top of my head. But like maple poplar, we know that works. I've been working with walnut and poplar, really good results, and just glued up a snare with its maple and walnut. So that's, I'm excited about listening to that. You're either better doing extremely hard and extremely soft, or very, very close. Another combination, well, I don't want to give away all my secrets. I have another combination I'll be working on pretty soon that I'm excited about. But you have to just try it. It's expensive to try it. It's time. But sometimes they're magical. I was really blown away by the walnut poplar. That was exciting. It's fat. It's got great attack. It's punchy, and it's versatile. It has a pretty wide tuning range. But even if it doesn't have a wide tuning range, if you get 2 or 3 sounds out of it that you're really happy with, and especially if you're a recording drummer, then that's all you need. And most guys, I don't know about you, but I'm not going to every gig and retuning my kit every time.
No, never.
I'm getting a tuning I'm really happy with. And if I'm playing blues, then it works. If I'm playing rock and roll, it works. Just get them sound. You got a good sounding drum, you can play anything. As long as the drummer's competent. I'm not competent. You're competent.
Well, I'm excited to put these things to the test. So we'll have tons of demos and comparisons. I'm going to go full tuning range on each one of these things, so we can hear what, how high they can go and how low they can go and what falls in between. We'll let everyone listening pick their winners. And then we might be having all these drums up for sale, so stay tuned on that.
That would be cool. Just let me know.
All right, thanks, Chris.
All right, brother. I'll see you.
All right, I know that probably felt like a teaser with no demos to show this week, but we're going to have plenty of demos to explore over the next couple episodes, so stay tuned for that. All right, let's get back to our featured interview. This is part 2 of Tom Wendt's interview with great Brazilian jazz drummer Duduka da Fonseca.
That's okay. I tell you what, talk about when you started teaching at Drummers Collective in New York, because you were there, as you said, for like 20 years, right?
Bob Weir, my dear friend Bob Weir, and the co-author of the book that we have, the Brazilian Rhythms for drum set.
For drum set.
It took us 4 years to do the book, And now Bob Weir say, because Bob is the intellectual guy, and besides being a fantastic player.
Yes.
And my brother, we're so good friends, I love him so much, and we were like brothers, and he said, hey, Duduka, you got to teach here at Drummers Collect. I said, Bob, I never taught before, I never teach before, and I don't think it's a good idea. I don't read music. I never teach. You gotta teach. You gotta teach. You gotta. He stayed 2 years on my case or something like that. You gotta teach.
Wow.
And then I said, okay. Since when I started, I was like insecure, so I took a percussion player with me. The first one that I took was a Ciro Batista. is Cyril. Is a guy that played percussion. Excellent, a good friend. We had a band together,
Yes.
for many years, New York Samba Band. And I took him because it felt more comfortable for me, explaining things between drums and percussion. And then I started to feel more confident, And then I took Guilherme Franco, also another great percussion player, And it was great. So the interaction in Baião between, the percussion and in samba and this, and partido alto, and whatever, maracatu, whatever the rhythms. And I said, okay. And then I started to feel better and more confident, that insecurity went away. And I'm going to start to teach by myself, And it was great because it gave me much more knowledge what I was doing, since I never had a formal study. I never studied formally. It started to give more knowledge because the students ask, what are you doing with your right hand? What are you doing with your left hand? I said, I don't know. So I need to stop and think, what I was doing.
Yeah.
And then I show a pattern with the right hand. I show a pattern with the left hand. And then the next day, one student comes, hey, Duduka, how about if you mix that pattern of the right hand, the second pattern, with that pattern, the left hand? I said, man, that sounds better than I was, They start to mixing things, And so it was a great experience, And I'm very fortunate to teach there for 16, 17 years, But in the end, I think I still teaching when I go out, to do master class. But I love when I go to Europe or someplace. But even in the United States, But I love to do with a rhythm session because I can show the pattern on the drums, and then I can see that how it can work with the bass and piano or guitar and piano.
Yes.
And that's the way I start, at Drummers Collect. And then I stayed there for, I told you 16, 17 years. And then my younger daughter born, and Isabella, that's now 24, 20. And I started to think I'm repeating too much myself, and I wasn't feeling good with that because I found a formula that works, about sticking and orchestration. I can send to you. You're gonna see it's good. Once you learn a sticking by the way you orchestrate around the drums, you can create different patterns, different textures, and everything. It really works. But I said after a few years, I said, boy, I'm repeating too much myself. Even though it's a valid thing, I said, I think I was feeling a little anxiety, or I said, you know what? I think it's better for me to take a time. And my daughter was born in two, a younger daughter, Isabella. I said, I'm going to take a time. And then, and the book, that I did with Bob, we did together, was like he used to come to my basement I had a basement studio in the basement of, in the West Village. And he used to come, I play, he take notes, I play, he take notes, I play, he take notes. We talk about things, we stay there. And after years of that, doing that, we went to the studio, a very fun studio downtown New York, Manhattan. And Bob said, okay, let's do it. And it was like 160, 107 extra pattern exercise. And Bob, a lot. And Bob was in the booth, and say, okay, exercise number, whatever, X, with the hi-hat 0, and then he count 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, tuck, whatever, what it was.
Yeah. We should probably let people know that, the book you're talking about is Brazilian Rhythms for Drum Set, which you put out with Bob, which is really, it's sort of the modern day Bible of Brazilian, drumming for drum set. Oh man, it's a marvelous book. I use it myself, and if you don't own it, all the drummers who might be watching and listening,
Yeah.
you definitely need to get a copy of it, because you'll learn all of the
This
essentials
is
of
good
this
because
music.
the book, Tom, is still selling today. So we did
Good.
that, and we did so many. We spent so much time. It took us 4 years to do the thing. So, and we sent. I sent to Antonio Carlos Jobim. I sent to Ayrton, and we sent to Steve Gadd for them to write. And I didn't send to
Sure.
Steve Gadd. Ciro Batista was playing with Paul Simon. He gave the blueprint of the book to Steve. And Steve,
Wow.
he read the whole thing because said everything sounds good. And John Riley had done the transcription, the final transcriptions. Because John can hear
Okay.
everything, he's great. He's excellent.
He's very good
And
at that. Yeah.
Steve said, on page 22 and 23, we have a little mistakes, in the writing, and it was. So
Wow.
it's because he read the thing, and he said on page 23, everything is good. On page 23, you can fix that, no problem. And also the second thing is,
Yeah.
if you're playing 2/4, why are you counting 4/4? Because Bob used to count 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, tagaraga, dagaraga, dagaraga, And I said, Bob, he's right. I said, no. Because when you're in the live gig, we usually count 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, and play samba, or baião, or whatever you play.
Right.
But
Right.
if you're doing a book, if you're playing 2/4 and you write in 4/4, the 8 notes are going to become a 16 notes. It's going to double the value. And I said, and
Yes.
Bob was, no, Duduka, we don't need it. Because at that time, Tom, we didn't have Pro Tools. We're talking about the 90s,
Mhm.
early 90s. We didn't have Pro
Yeah.
Tools. So what? And I insist, no, Bob, I'm going to do it. 106, 107 exercise, So I need to go. I had a code. I need to go to the studio. They put the exercise, the pattern that I play in the middle. So I count 1, 2, 1
Mhm.
and 2 and 1, 2, 1 and 2 and then I
Yes.
did that, and with the mouse of the Macintosh, they pull my from the DAT, they pull my voice for right before the exercise. It took 72 hours.
Ah.
What now would take like 1 hour, 1.5
Wow.
hours. It took 72 hours to do that. Anyway, I did, and I came
Man.
home. At that time, my 41 years old daughter, Alana, was 9 years old or something like that. And I show her, look, I redid all the countings. Check it out. See if you like. 1, 2, 1. I said, Dad, because her mother, she's American. Her mother, it's not 2, it's 2. 1, 2. I said, come on, give me a break, It's not 2. I said, no, now it's done. And so we did that. If you notice,
Yeah.
you have that counting, that sometimes is a little,
Yeah.
the precision
Yep.
is not 100% because, but because
Yeah.
you didn't have the Pro Tools or elements, technological elements to do in a faster. But I think it's good enough. And then, we did
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
and I'm very happy, and Bob too. And I think we
You
help,
should be. It's a wonderful book, man.
many people. We told, we also did a lot of research in the history of Brazilian music, which is very
Yeah.
important. It's
Yeah, I
very
love that part
important,
of it.
to
Yes.
anyone that's attempt to play Brazilian music. I think it's very important to research, to go through the history, how the
Yes.
things, not just from bossa nova, but from much before, because what most of people are not aware is that since the early 20th century, Brazil, like 1911, 1912, or that time, Brazil was exporting machixe, was a rhythm that was before samba, was exporting to the United States. Ernesto Nazaré, a composer, was composed and sent this music, and the Castle Brothers. You even can find Castle Brothers, they were dancers. They used to dance to those
Yes.
Brazilian songs. So it goes back.
Yes,
It goes
absolutely.
back
I'm very
like
familiar.
from the beginning of the 20th century, and then after that we had the Carmen Miranda in the 40s, the phenomenon Carmen Miranda, and then we had the bossa nova in the 60s, and then we have the revival of bossa nova and the samba jazz, in the 80s, or something like that. Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
but before that, it's fascinating to see the history of Brazilian music, to read. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
read
For
when
sure.
we were doing Emily Moorfield, wrote the introduction, but we got many times together because I use a book by I forgot. I use this book here, you know, uh, Dicionário Musical Brasileiro by Mário de
Oh, wow.
Andrade. Is a thick book, and they have
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
the the elements, not all, but a lot, of the elements of,
Mm-hmm.
like for instance, all the elements of Brazilian, like rhythms and partida, partitura. They had something I want to show, but it's hard to find now. About Partido Alto, but it's a
That's okay.
great
That's
book.
all right.
And I could not
Yeah.
recommend more.
Yeah, for
But you
sure.
need to read Portuguese. Mário de
Wonderful.
Andrade was a great writer and a
Yeah.
researcher of music all over Brazil. And he has a collection of folkloric
Gotcha.
Brazilian music, that he recorded by traveling
Wow.
Brazil and record with
Yeah.
equipment. I think he import from Switzerland, recording, the very old,
Yeah.
Switzerland
Yeah.
record, like kind of Neumann or whatever was the name.
It's very similar to the
Yes,
folkways recordings
and
here
you
in the
know
United
what? Another
States.
important thing, my mind is flying, but when the first American jazz tune was recorded in 1917, is registered. When the first
Yes.
samba was recorded in Brazil? 1917, the
No.
same year by Donga.
Really?
Pelo
Wow.
telefone
Ah.
is the name of the song, by the telephone.
Okay.
Pelo telefone. So it's a very coincidence,
Wow.
and I think the union,
Yeah, that's amazing.
the mixing of the Brazilian and the jazz music is fantastic, because they used to ask to Jobim,
Yeah.
uh, but your music have some jazz elements. I said, look, I like very much jazz, but like Gershon, many, Duke Ellington, many composers, American composers, I also listen to Chopin, to
Mm-hmm.
Debussy, to Ravel. So those chords with
Wow.
nine, and things, I heard from classical music,
Yes.
because he wrote classical music,
Yeah. Yeah.
and has a lot of classical influence, like
Absolutely.
Americans, besides the African rhythms that they both have,
Sure.
even
Mm-hmm.
from different parts of Africa, from the African continent, have a lot of harmonic, European, East and Western European influence.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah. Yes.
well, that's why I think it's so beautiful. You see Miles Davis record Brazil album of Brazilian music. So many are Bill Evans. And so many
Sure.
great artists.
It's a very big part
They
of American
recorded
music
Stan
now. Yeah.
Getz, and the
Yeah.
Stan Getz was the one. I had the privilege to play with him and Astrid. When I was playing with Astrid,
Yeah.
was the one that through that album, Getz
Yes.
Gilberto was able to, make the bossa nova worldwide famous. But before that, bossa nova in the late
Yeah.
50s was already a big hit, and was created in Rio de Janeiro, like choro music that was before bossa nova was created in Rio. Rio was the capital of
Mhm.
Brazil before Brasilia. When I was born, Brasilia became the capital in 1960, but before that was Rio de Janeiro. And Rio was the cultural center
Yeah.
of Brazil and used to export music to all over Brazil. So things changed,
Yeah.
but now, São Paulo and Bahia, and, they have their own. But Rio
Yeah.
at the time, Rio was. And the samba too. The samba, was, it came from Africa and was developed to Bahia and was developed in Rio de Janeiro. So no
Yeah.
one plays samba the way we play, the style that we play in Rio de Janeiro, not because I'm from Rio, but it's different. I'm not judging which is better, which is not better.
Sure.
In São Paulo and all over Brazil, they
Sure.
have great musicians that play
Yeah.
fantastic,
Yeah.
But Rio was the,
Yeah.
yes,
You know,
tell me.
No, I was just going to say, speaking of American musicians, the last time, that I saw you in person, we were both on the same bill at Manchester Craftsman's Guild.
Oh,
We were playing with the great Rufus Reed, and you actually you gave me probably the best piece of advice I've ever gotten about playing Brazilian music. You were talking about how a lot of times American drummers, when they play the bass drum, they play the notes
sometimes.
too close together. And you were telling me,
Yes,
you were saying,
yes.
think of it like it's in 6/8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
That's one of the best pieces of advice I ever got. Could you talk a little bit about some of the important elements of playing that kind of music on the drums? What are some of the things people
With so many
should know
things,
about?
with so many things. For me,
Yeah, I
the
know.
guy that was like our Brazilian Kenny Clark and Roy Haynes and Max Roach was the great innovator was Edson Machado. Because before, like in jazz, we used to play the drums around the drum, samba around the drums, and the cymbal just to make
Mm-hmm.
some accents. But we used to play in the snares, like
Ah,
some and the history said that Edson Machado was playing in a dance ball, and he was playing the snares and the drums using the cymbals to play melodic, just the accents, and his snare broke the head. So everything he was doing the snare, he started doing the cymbal. And he was the first one
wow.
that introduced, that's a little polemic there. Some people say that was Godofredo, some about the bass drum, the ostinato, dum 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 dum, to incorporate that, because people used to play like
Mm-hmm.
the bass drum like the surdo,
Like the surdo.
One, two, one and not two, one and not
Yeah.
two. And then Machado started to do tudum, tudum, tudum. And then in 1964, in our album Rio 65 Trio with Dom Salvador and Sergio Barroso, he started to use the bass drums to play melodic accents. That was amazing.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So just playing, if you hear that album,
Yeah.
look for Rio 65 Trio with Dom Salvador, Edson Machado, and Sérgio Barroso Neto. It's amazing album. You know, it's a,
it's a great
and from
record.
that point on,
Yeah.
in the 70s, I started to experience doing that, to use the bass drum, just playing melodic accents. When I come to America in 75 and started to play with American musicians, non-Brazilian musicians, they asked me, can you play the ostinato in the bass drum? I said, because we can't understand very much, you know. We need that foundation. I said, okay. So I have nothing against playing the ostinato on the bass drum. It's fine. But it's also fine to use the bass drum once you really know the foundation of the music. To use the bass drum, you can feather the ostinato feather like you do playing straight ahead, and then play accents, you know.
That was one of the first things I noticed when I got a chance to see you play live. I was fascinated by that fact that you weren't playing that ostinato all the time. I had never seen that before.
You're gonna take away from the bass player, you know. In a situation like that with Rufus, as a matter of fact, you know, we have an album I did with Rufus. Well, it's coming out right now on Sunny Side, also with a string quartet. Serious string quartet.
Yes.
And it's very good because I had a chance to play some straight ahead with a great bass player. But before that, the first bass player that I had to play, and I played in his group for like 4 years, 4 years, was Eddie Gomez, you know. Was the first time that I played with a great bass player playing straight ahead. And he's very much different than Rufus playing. Even Rufus is a big fan of Eddie Gomez, and vice versa, I believe. You know,
right?
It's a very two different conceptions. And for me to play with those guys, because when you come to another country and you're Brazilian, they stamp, okay, Brazilian music, and then they start to call you to do the Brazilian, you know, recording, which is fine. I did with Phil Woods, with Jerry Mulligan, with all those guys. It's fine. With Schofield, with many of them. It's fine. But I love to play straight ahead too. And thank God I had a chance to play and record a few albums with Rufus, you know, and playing straight ahead. And I had the chance also to share with him and the great Steve Ali, piano player, a little knowledge that I have, some knowledge that I have of Brazilian music, you know. So to tell them, you know, because they ask me, is that okay? Is that okay? Is that okay? And I had the knowledge. I had I was able to playing with them, not talking much, but playing. They understand and what's a baião. They didn't know exactly what was a baião, you know, from the northeast of Brazil. And I brought some tunes, especially on the first album that we did, that called Rufus Reid Out Front Trio. It's just the trio. That I brought some tunes like samba, partido alto, baião. So, and it was a learning experience for both sides. For me to play with great American musicians, because it's different, Tom. When you play samba with Brazilian musicians, is one thing. Is one thing. With musicians that you like, is one thing. When you play jazz with Brazilian musicians, it's not the same as you playing jazz with American musicians. It's another thing. Also, when you play jazz or when you play Brazilian rhythms with American musicians, you need naturally to do accommodation, you know, which is fine because my goal is to blend, to mix in equal parts those rhythms, which is fine. So it's always a learning experience, you know, and I just
man.
love doing that, and
No, I think you have done that better than almost everyone as far as the drummers from Brazil. You're one of the great masters of that music. But you, as you said, you have such a love for straight ahead and such a great understanding of
yes,
it. You've really been
but
able to
like I
blend both of
said,
them
Tom, it's
together.
important. I don't want to sound like a teacher or a repeating machine. For
No.
every drummer, every musician, not just drummer, interest to play Brazilian music, that's non-Brazilian, can be French, can be Germany, can be American, can be anyone. Go look at the history of the music. Learn how the people used to play before. From the first recording, 1917, learn how the drums used to be played. Until today, the evolution of the drum. If you can speak Portuguese, it's even better. Because speaking Portuguese, you're gonna somehow the language, it help you to understand the culture more.
Yes.
And if you can go to Brazil, not
Yes,
right now,
you're
the
totally
president
right.
is terrible, Wait for the next president. I'm sorry about some people that don't, but
That's
the
okay.
president, for me, is not good. He he doesn't
Yeah,
support
for me either.
arts. He cut the culture,
Right.
how I say, Ministry of culture, thing. The movies,
Yes.
he doesn't, he used to be from the army, you know,
Yeah.
and he's a very tough guy,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
he
I hear
wants
you.
to be a tropical whatever. I'm not going to say the
Yeah.
name because some people here are Republicans, but so it's better I don't get in problem.
It's all good. That's okay. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the things you've been doing recently, and I wanted to start by, I know you've had this group for a while, but could you talk about Trio de Paz with
Trio
Homero
da
and
Paz
Nielsen? That's such a
is like
wonderful
we've been
group.
over 30 years together since 1986. That make us 34 years together. It's like a marriage,
Wow.
like an old marriage.
That
Yeah,
is.
but
That's a
sometimes we
long
fight a
time, man.
lot
Trio
because
of
we're too
peace,
long
right? Trio of
together.
peace.
Like any man, but we love each other. We just play. Uh,
Yeah.
we play a week at Dizzy's,
You
and
guys at
this time
Dizzy's?
usually Joe Locke, Claudio Roditi,
Yeah.
Joe Locke before Claudio Roditi, and Harry Allen, and
Was Harry Allen playing with
Harry
you guys?
always. Harry, my
Yeah.
wife Maúcha Diné, Trio da Paz and friends. This time, Randy Brecker was supposed to play, but
Yeah.
he had some, traveling he really wanted to do, but he had some, and so we
Yeah.
call a great guy that's a piano player from Brazil and accordion player. So it changed completely the vibe of the
Ah,
trio when we play together. We
wow.
play songs just the trio, and we play with him.
Yes.
Since he's from a very much younger generation,
Wow.
because in the trio, Nilsson is the older one.
Mm-hmm.
He's a couple of years older than me. I'm 71, and Homer is the younger one. It doesn't look that way, but that's the
Mm-hmm.
way it is.
Yeah.
And since Vitor
I
Gonçalves
got
is
you.
his name, he's from a younger generation. He's 40 years old or 40 something. He has some new
Mm-hmm.
harmonic conceptions in mind and things like that. So he took
Oh, wow.
out in a very
Yeah.
good way, like say Trio da Paz from the comfort zone that we playing
Yeah.
together for so long, and it gave you
Yeah.
a different perspective.
Sure.
It made us to reach for something else,
Yes.
which was a great learning experience, and
Yeah.
it was great to play with him. And his accordion
That's
player
wonderful.
is amazing, and the
Yeah.
sound, I love. And he's
Yeah.
from Brazil. He understands all the, because some of the other guys, Harry Allen is great because Harry study and Harry understand Brazilian music, and Claudio too. But some of the guys,
Yes.
they play
Yes.
in 2/4, but they think in 4/4. They don't think in 2/4. They think in 4/4, and
Gotcha.
that's one thing that I insist. I think is fine, even when you tap your foot. Don't do it like do like
Yeah.
like for the piano player, for instance. If he's not using too much the sustain pedal, which is a
Yes.
problem sometimes,
Yeah. Yeah. Let's kind of wrap up by talking about your brand new record that's going to be out in October. Could you talk about that? It's a really great project
I love
with your
those,
quartet, yeah?
Those guys, they moved to New York before the pandemic, in 2019. One study at the New School. Fantastic guitar player from São Paulo. I think the same level as Romero, as Chico
Yes, he's
Pinheiro,
fantastic.
those Brazilian guys. These guys, Vinicius Gomez, he's amazing. And the bass player, he used to live in
Yeah.
Germany, in Berlin, and then he used to live a lot in France, in Paris. So he moved here
Gotcha.
before the pandemic too. And one time I went to see a friend of mine playing at Central Park, Dom Salvador, the piano player. And after that, we are hanging together at
Yes.
Central Park this summer, like a couple years ago or something. And so let's have a beer. Salvador, I mean, he's 84 now. He took so long for him to get dressed,
Wow.
to change his clothes, anyway, but then we went out, and Vinicius, the guitar player, and Gilly, they came to me and said, Duduka, we want to play with you. Can we rent a studio and we play?
Wow.
And I felt very flattered. I wrote that in the liner notes. I felt, my God, those young guys,
Yes.
is very good. And I said, instead of rent a studio, how about we do a few rehearsals at my house, because I have a Fender Rhodes here, and do snare just to get the form of the tunes and the tunes and my ideas that I have in mind. And then we start to get gigs, like underground gigs. I'm talking about place in Queens, place in Brooklyn, beautiful place, but underground. It's not like This Is Club or the Blue Note.
Yeah.
We just want to play. And we play, and the bass player recorded every time we played. So I listened to everything, and that make me aware of what was working, what was not working. And then I start to play, and rehearse, I start to select a repertoire. And then I did something that I learned from Herbie Mann, from the time that I used to play with the late Herbie Mann. We start playing together, Trio da Paz and Herbie Mann, and he said, let's do an album. In fact, it wasn't Trio da Paz. It was Romero, me, Mark Soskin, and Paul Sokolov. And Claudio Roditi did a couple tracks as a special guest. And then Herbie said, we are going to Hawaii. We're going to spend a lot of time on the road. And he said, before we're traveling, I want to do an album. I said, but Herbie, why don't you wait? We're going to be playing every night, for like a couple months. It's going to sound much better when we come back. And he said to me, it was a lesson he told me. That's why I record with my quartet, thanks to Herbie Mann. He said, yes, Duduka, we might be playing better, but the freshness that we're having now, it will never happen again. It's like if you want to have a when you meet someone that you love, the first months of the relationship, the first year, things change and might even get better with the time. or a friendship.
Yeah.
Things
Yep.
change, but it's never going to be the same as was in the
Absolutely.
beginning. Document, I learned that
Yeah,
from
you
him.
wanted to document
And I said,
that
let's
part of it,
record
yeah.
now. So I meet the guys in the summer of 2021, and I record it was in September, I think. And we start gigging in October, and I record the album on April 25 and 26 of 2022. By then, I have a clear idea of what to do, and also what I try to do, since it's a quartet. Sometimes, I don't know if you notice, in some tunes, for instance, a tune by Hermeto Pascoal called Montreux, which is a place in Switzerland. I said, let's try that. The piano plays the entire melody. When come on 8 bars in the bridge, the guitar plays, with the piano, and then get out, just 8 bars. Then the piano keep playing, and then a bass solo with just piano, bass, and drums. And then, out of nothing, the guitar start the solo, to change, to give a different texture, to live, to juggle a little bit with the instruments.
Absolutely.
So it's not going to be the same texture the whole time. You can,
of course,
in a subtle way, without compromising the music, you can do that. It's a different colors. It's a different colors.
It's a lot of different colors, the way you're utilizing everybody.
It took me a long time not a long time, but months to figure out what I want to do. And also, one thing that I didn't want to do is to emphasize the Brazilian rhythms. Let's play more loose. Let's play one way that is that mix that I told you, that Brazilian with the jazz. Let's play that way, You don't need to play that to-dum, to-dum, to-dum. The bass is doing that already. Let's play loose on top of that. Not very loose, respecting the foundation, of course. You got to respect the foundation. You don't want to reinvent the wheel, but you can take chance,
Sure. It's a fantastic record, and it's going to be out
Records,
on October 21st, right? On Sunnyside Records?
The name of the album is under my name, Duduka da Fonseca, and Quarteto, which means quartet, Quarteto Universal, which the idea, it sounds a little pretentious, Quarteto Universal, but Universal, when I thought about giving this name to the group, Quarteto Universal is something that everyone has access. Every people. You, me, the people in the corner here, the people in the corner there, everyone is supposed to listen and have access. That's what I want to achieve.
That's a beautiful thing, man. It's a...
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And the name of the album is Yes, right? That's a good name for the record, because when I listened to it, I said that a lot.
All right, now let's shift gears a bit. Here is a lesson that I made on how to use the Flam Taps in more creative ways. This week, we're going to take a look at the Flam Tap and some ways that we can create syncopated odd groupings by just adding an extra tap to the rudiment. Before we get there, let's review what the Flam Tap is. The Flam Tap is a flam followed by a tap with the same hand and then repeated with the other hand. Flam and then a tap with the same hand. So right flam, right tap, left flam, left tap, or the opposite. Left hand, left tap, right flam, right tap. And those flow well together. It creates this back and forth pendulum. Or other hand. Now, it's almost always taut with the flam on the downbeat. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, But if you start with the tap, it'll displace the flam tap to be on the E's and U's. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. So again, that was a right tap to offset, and then the flams start with the left. Right, left, left, right, 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 right. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3. All right, so what's an exercise that you can practice to get from playing them on the downbeat to the offbeat? Do a measure of regular flam taps, and then when you get to beat 1, the second measure, just add an extra tap with the opposite hand. So 1 E and a, 2 E and a, E and a, 4 E and a, right tap, and then we start playing the flam taps on the E's and U's. So that's a 2-bar cycle. Let's try it. 1 E and a, ready, go. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. Now what do? To get to the third measure, since that second measure ends on a flam, you just do an alternating flam, and now you start the whole exercise on the left side. So now with the left, 1 E and a, 2 E and a 4 E and a, tap E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. So the whole thing is a 4-bar cycle. Now let's try the whole thing, 4-bar phrase. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, ready and a, go E and a 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 4 E and repeat it, and a 2 E and a 3, 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. All right, now let's shorten the phrase. We're just going to do 2 beats of each variation. So 1 E and a 2 E and a switch E and a 2 E and switch E and a 2 E and a 3 E, 4 E and a 1. Try that. 1, 2, ready, go. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and 4 E and a 1 E and 2 E and a 3, 4 E and repeat it, and a 2 E and a 3 E and 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. Now, if you shorten it down to just 1 beat before you flip it, it's going to be a 5-note grouping. This will be flam, tap, and an extra tap with the opposite hand to throw it to the offbeat. That's 5 16th notes. It's an interesting phrase. What we're going to do here is we're going to repeat the 5s until you get to the end of 2 measures. And at the end of 2 measures, you have an extra flam tap to play, which will then flip you over to the opposite hand. So very slowly, 1 E and a 2 E, a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and 4 E, flam tap flip E and a 2 E, a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E, flam tap, back to the beginning. It's a pretty tricky phrase because you have 5 16th notes cycling over 2 bars. So take your time with it, count it out loud, write it out if you need to. Eventually you'll memorize the way that this thing flows. And also there's some muscle memory with how it feels in your hands. So trust your hands once they kind of learn the pattern. Let's try it again just a little bit faster. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 4 E, flam tap 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E, flam tap 1. Hopefully you're following along. You can see the potential here for this to really open up a lot of creative options with the flam taps. So they don't always have to be played so downbeat heavy. Even if you just focus on those first exercises with getting the offbeat version, 1 E, 2 E, and 4 E. There's a lot you can do when you start messing around with the kit, and then especially when you start internalizing this 5. That has like a certain flow to it. which is really cool. So we'll get into the stuff on the kit in a later lesson. But for now, try these exercises. Again, go super slow, use a metronome, count out loud, and then have fun with it. See you next time. All right, now it's time to head back over to Hawthorne Drum Shop for our Shop Talk section. This week we are checking out a vintage Pearl wood fiberglass kit. What do we have here? This is a Pearl wood fiberglass. The year is, I'm going to guess, mid-70s.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah. You know, the thing with the year is that's a question that we get a lot, and I think it applies. I don't trust like not catalogs, like, you know, those serial charts and everything.
Yeah.
Like, so definitely 1970s. If you're not like familiar with drums and like catalogs, which I'm really not, to be honest, there's kind of some giveaways. The wrap, definitely kind of like a psychedelic style wrap.
That's why I said 70s.
Yeah,
Otherwise, I would have said
right.
early 80s.
So that's, you know, you kind of look at the badges, kind of a 70s style badge as well. But yeah, they made maple shells. I think towards the end of the 70s, maybe they did the maple. They did a fiberglass, like an all fiberglass shell, and then they made a combo, fiberglass wood, which is what these are.
It's not maple though, right? It looks like it's Luan.
Probably Luan, yeah.
Because it looks like vertical grain Luan. So you were saying they laid it up like wood and then a coating of fiberglass?
Yeah, I was looking at these, and I haven't like done a deep dive, but it looks like they would do like a ply of wood, then like, I wouldn't even want to call it a ply, a layer of like fiberglass.
Yeah.
Because you could see like, and it's not like the cleanest looking interior of a shell.
It's pretty rough.
Yeah.
I would definitely put coated heads on this.
They're cool. They're really loud. Most thicker drums are pretty loud, pretty bombastic. The wrap and like this style wrap, like the strata just always gets me.
It looks like they were borrowing some Rogers style stuff. Like you've got the tom arms or whatever sort of Rogers like.
This was before they went to the dreaded like
Holes in
pearl mount. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
You know, you see, oh, look at that, oh no. You know, yeah, so they're kind of like not as ugly. Yeah, they got the hex. And we were talking like, these are pretty reliable, but like you still gotta like wrench some of this stuff down to make sure that it stays, you know?
Yep.
If it were me and I'm playing this as a 3-piece set, this would be probably on a stand. But
oh, it's separate arms, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
which is nice.
It's a cool kit. This would be a fun kit to just smack around.
Wrap is actually pretty clean. A lot of like this style wrap will crack pretty easily. If it gets wet, it'll look real splotchy, you know, because it's so thin.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if the wood gets wet or gets any type of mold or whatever, staining will show through. There's some like kind of, I don't know if you can see them, some hairline cracks a lot of times will come like right out here on a lug. And then this part of the wrap will kind of bulk up a little bit. People call that eyebrowing, which is an annoying term.
I didn't know that was a term.
You could this is kind of a rule with, maybe not a rule, but a lot of times with vintage drums, like inlay will age differently than the shell. So this actually looks like it's aged less. I would imagine if it's getting green, a lot of times when blue gets green, it's just because of like a sun type thing. But pretty much even fade throughout the whole kit. We didn't even talk about the sizes. General rock sizes, 22, 14, 8, 12, 9, 13, 16 by 16.
No gaskets.
No gaskets. Hey, they weren't worried about splay back then, were they? These are kind of, the leg mounts are Ludwig kind of style, and they actually made some mounts that looked almost exactly like Ludwig. Here's the thing with Pearl is they put out some really cool drums in the last couple of years. They did the President series, which is the phenolic. We've never done those. They reissued these a few years ago too. You had a kit like that, right?
Yep, and they were great.
They're really nice. You're really loud. Definitely like, I mean, these are old drums. You know, like we were talking about technology, like we've come a long way with how we make shells. But, you know, the company believed in these drums enough to reissue them. So, except this wrap is way cooler than anything that they've done.
I know. That'd be a cool one to bring back.
This kit's probably, we haven't listed it yet, but it's not going to be like mad expensive either. So, They're heavy. They're gonna. It's gonna kind of hurt your back a little bit when you carry these if you're gonna gig, but they'll sound pretty dang good.
Yeah, it's fun. That's a fun kit.
Okay, let's get to a couple listener questions here. This first one is from Jason Farlow. S-hoops, ? Are they any good or just a gimmick? They're not a gimmick. There's nothing gimmicky about them. If you don't know what the S-hoops are, I guess there's technically a triple flange hoop, but the top, instead of being rolled slightly outward, it's a bigger flange that's almost flat. So you got a pretty wide surface area when you hit rim clicks and rim shots. I've used these a bunch. I have them on a couple different snare drums currently. They're not a gimmick. They definitely do what they do. They make a triple flange hoop sound a little bit more chunky like a die cast, but they don't feel quite as stiff and rigid as a die cast. I like them. One thing to consider is microphone clips don't work great on them sometimes because they have to extend a little bit further in. It's just not the best hoop to use a clip-on mic. Also, because that upper flange extends into the head a little bit more, you have a little bit less surface area for certain things. Notably, if you use like a big fat snare drum mute, it's going to be hard to get on and off the drum quickly, or even at all if you can make it fit. And then some dampening devices just might not be the perfect situation with those hoops. But I think they sound great. They feel great. They do a good job of drying up the sound without making it super choked. So if you're looking for a new alternative that's somewhere in between triple flange and die cast, maybe leaning more towards triple flange, check out the S-hoops. Here's one from Chip Buck. What is your favorite David Garibaldi groove? That is impossible. That's like trying to pick my favorite food. All of them, I think probably the one, if I sat down to Kit and you said, play me a David Garibaldi groove, what I would probably do would be play the intro to Squib Cakes. That's the one thing that I kind of figured out a long time ago. Everything else, like Back to Oakland, those, Soul Vaccination, gosh, they're all kind of the same world. So I think it's just a universe. I love it all. And I haven't actually tried to transcribe much of it. I kind of let Garibaldi's thing be Garibaldi's thing. But if there's one that I would do an impression of, it would be Squib Cakes. All right, we got one more here. This is from Mark. Any recommendations on how to avoid sympathetic snare buzz from a high tom or floor tom? This is an interesting dilemma that I think everyone deals with in one way or another. What that usually means is one of your toms is tuned too closely to where the snare drum is tuned. Either if you're going for a super low snare sound, maybe your floor tom is too close to the same pitch, or if it's a higher snare sound, your rack tom might be too close in pitch. So something's got to give. Either have to tune the tom differently, higher or lower, to get it out of that range, or you got to change your snare drum. That's really, I can't think of any other solution in that case. So I would usually either change the tom or remove the tom if I don't really need it, since the snare is often the definitive sound for a track in certain genres. But if it's something that's maybe just having a tighter snare drum overall, we'll get rid of that. Mess with that. That'd be the first thing I would do, would be change the tune of your toms. The other thing is usually the sympathetic snare buzz comes into effect when you're trying to have a very tight snare wire sound. Like if you got the snare wires like particularly tight, they'll probably be silent most of the time until you hit that one drum that activates it. So you're noticing it a lot more. I often go the opposite direction. I'll just loosen the wires so the whole kit just kind of rattles, and that one drum doesn't stick out as creating sympathetic buzz because the whole kit is rattling. So that's something for me in my own psyche, is to just go with a much looser snare sound. Wires, like loosen the wires themselves. So the whole thing kind of rattles and creates like a constant reverb. Other than that, you got to change the tuning of something. All right, hope that helps. If you have any questions for the show, shoot them over to drumcandypodcast@gmail.com, and I will do my best to answer them. All right, we've come to the end of the episode, which means it's time for the warehouse pick of the week. I had something else planned, but I just realized on Monday that I've used the exact same snare drum and exact same snare drum head on every gig going back to, I want to say, late March until this past week. So I've got to call it out. It is the Evans UV1 snare drum head. It looks brand new. The coating is not wearing off at all. There's no dents. There's no chips. It looks brand freaking new. And I'm playing with sticks and brushes and mallets. And I'm hitting, I wouldn't say I'm slamming. I'm hitting moderately hard. It's it's like a Motown funk soul kind of a situation, with some jazz and some, classic rock, but nothing too bashy. But anyway, very rarely does a head last that long, especially when I'm using brushes and stuff. So yeah, if you're looking for a durable one-ply head you haven't tried, it'll last. Check out the Evans UV1. That is it for this week's episode. Thank you all for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed all these different segments. Next week, we're going to get into a bunch of snare drum demos with these different Prime Series 5.5 by 14 wood drums. Got another shop talk. Got a new interview coming up. What are we doing next week? Zach Danziger. We got him coming on the show. So yeah, jam-packed show. Thanks for your support as always. Always reach out, stay in touch. If you don't mind, giving us a 5-star rating, dropping some words over in iTunes or Spotify or Google Podcasts or YouTube, wherever you're consuming this show. Make sure you're following us on YouTube. If you're not already, hit the notifications button. All the stuff you're supposed to do that they tell me every week to mention. Doesn't go unnoticed. Much, much appreciated. See you next week.